Welcome to Official History World, where history comes alive. Explore the events, empires, and people that shaped our world. Subscribe and be part of our journey through time.
Between 1915 and 1918, Italy and Austria-Hungary fought a bloody war along the Italian front during World War I. Italy had remained neutral for the first 9 months of the war, but turned on its former ally Austria-Hungary in the spring of 1915 and joined the Triple Entente powers of the United Kingdom, France, and Russia. Italy had been lured into the alliance by getting promised large amounts of territory from the Austro-Hungarian Empire by the secret Treaty of London in April 1915. These battles took place along a 400-mile front in northern Italy. The most treacherous of the fighting took place in the Dolomitic Alps. The Austrians reached the higher ground first, and the Italians spent months and years trying to dislodge them. It is estimated that over 1 million Austro-Hungarians and Italians died during the brutal conflict. In what can be described as the most extreme battlefield in history, the fighting in the Italian Alps was surprisingly a mostly forgotten front during the war. Nothing like it has been seen before or since in the history of warfare. Soldiers had long manned Alpine frontiers to secure borders or march through these high passes en route to an invasion. However, the mountains themselves had never been the actual battlefield until the fighting in the Italian Alps. The mountain war in Italy was a battle of small units or even individuals. Single platoons could hold off hundreds or even thousands of men from bases atop tall rocks, with the attackers having no way to reach the enemy encampment. In 1915, a single platoon of Germans occupied a 700-foot-tall blade of rock, nicknamed the Castelletto, and with a machine gun they had littered the valley with dead Italian troops. When the Italians couldn't climb to or reach the high Austrian position on the Castelletto, and after a year of shelling it with artillery, they ended up tunneling and dynamiting over 100 feet into the sheer rock face under the enemy positions to bring down the rock with a massive bomb. The rocky terrain even made artillery shells deadlier. The brittle rock of the mountains shattered into lethal splinters, leading to 70% higher casualties per round compared to battlefields elsewhere in Europe. Hundreds and even thousands of men would die to try to take a single position on the side of a cliff face, trying to secure a supply line or break the bloody stalemate. In sub-zero temperatures, men dug miles of tunnels and caverns through glacial ice. They strung cableways up mountainsides and stitched rock faces with rope ladders to move soldiers onto the high peaks, then hauled up an arsenal of industrial warfare, heavy artillery and mortars, machine guns, poison gas, and flamethrowers. The soldiers also used the terrain itself as a weapon, rolling boulders to crush attackers and sawing through snow cornices with ropes to trigger avalanches. Storms, rock slides, and natural avalanches also killed thousands of men. This phenomenon would be known as the White Death. After heavy snowfalls in December of 1916, avalanches buried 10,000 Austrian and Italian troops in just over 2 days. The tragedy was that the Austro-Hungarians and Italians' losses and gains in these mountains made little difference. The Alpine War was a sideshow to the fighting elsewhere in Italy, which was mostly a sideshow to the western and eastern fronts. But for the common soldier, all that mattered was the patch of ground that must be held or taken, and whether he lived or died in doing that. The war on the Italian front didn't finally end until November 2nd, 1918, when the Italians finally defeated the Austrians at the Battle of Vittorio Veneto, taking over 300,000 prisoners. World War I officially ended 9 days later on November 11th, 1918. However, after the war, many of the territorial promises to Italy by the Treaty of London were never fulfilled by the Allied powers. This development led to a growing sense of nationalism in the country, and eventually to the rise of fascism in the coming years. Remnants from the war are still there in their icy tombs and resting places. Human remains, weapons, and buildings are still being discovered in the ice and snow to the present day.